So without much ado, I will be delving into the topic of budgeting and forecasting. So the resource person to take us through budgeting and forecasting is a manager in assurance unit and has over 7 years experience in accounting advisory services. She has played key roles in several assignments for a wide range of companies across numerous industries, including health, construction, engineering, and non-governmental organizations. Her areas of expertise include operation review, accounting and operations advisory, outsourced accounting services. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor again to invite the assistant manager by the Valeyir. Diana, a round of applause for Diana as she takes us through budgeting and forecasting. Very, very important topic for us in English. Very, very important. Please, Diana.
So I believe we all, one way or the other, have done some sort of budgeting in our personal lives, in our businesses, in our organizations. We've done some sort of budgeting. So after this session, it's either we are going to learn a thing or two on how to improve on our budgeting, or if we have not done before, we are going to start today to be budgeting and forecasting. Or maybe see how you can improve on that process in your organization. So I'm sure with other accountants here, I'm sure we've all heard that accountants are stingy, right? So actually, it's not our fault that we are stingy. We agree that we are stingy, but it's not our fault. Why? Because of the topic we are coming to right now. So everything the organization does centers around planning. And management likes to plan ahead of time. And in that planning, you need to put figures in those plans that you have set out to achieve. And they come and give to the accountant, this is the budget. And somebody comes that I need money for something. They go into the budget and, oh, sorry, we don't have a budget line for it. And they call you stingy. So it's something that accountants are dealing with, but let's see how we can make the process such that we don't get tagged as stingy. So we are going to look at what a budget is, what a forecast is. There's a difference between a budget and a forecast. We are going to look at that. Who can do budgeting and forecasting? When should budgeting and forecasting be done? So we heard from the PwC lady that their financial year is July. So they start their budgeting earlier. So if you know that you want to go to them for any funding, I think now is the best time to go, isn't it? What are the features of effective budgeting and forecasting? And what are the methods to use when you are doing budgeting and forecasting? Types of budget, control techniques, essentials, and then variance analysis. What is the budget? So we all have initiatives, we all have plans, we all have reasons why we set up our organizations. And so a budget is simply putting that plan, putting that initiative into figures. Where you want to go, what you want to achieve, what are the resources that you need to get there. and how are you going to get the funding to be able to achieve that goal that you have in mind. So budgeting is simply outlining your sources of income, how much you are expecting to receive, how much is going to come out of that into expenses. It can be operational, it can be administrative. You need to take into consideration all of that. And what are your targets? As already mentioned that in terms of revenue, do you want to work around reducing your expenses in case you have a tight revenue budget? All of that should come into consideration. So it is an outline of your revenue, your expenses, and your bottom line. Your bottom line will be a deficit or a surplus. Most of the time, we always want to go for a surplus, but you know that resources are limited, so it's not always the case. And even personally, I'm sure we don't like doing our personal budget because at the end of the day, we get a deficit. So it's a difficult exercise to do, but it's also very important. Next slide. So what is a forecast? So budget is more or less your plan, your goal. Forecast is how are you going to get there. So you predict. If you are planning to make a revenue or receive funding of 100,000 within the year, then you now predict based on past experiences or based on trends that are happening now. Do I think I'm going to make that 100,000? If not, what is my prediction of how much I'm going to make within this year? So that is more or less a forecast, predicting financial outcomes, informed by historical trends, data, and external factors. You know, there are some things that are not within our control. So when we are doing our budget, we are doing our forecast, we have to take all those into consideration. I'm sure last year, nobody knew that USAID was going to stop funding, but now here we are. So if you were doing your budget with that in mind, then you have to now go back. USAID is out of the picture now. What is now my forecast for whatever goal or initiative I'm pursuing at the moment? So that is more flexible than the budget. Budget, you cannot just change it like that. But the forecast is updated as and when trends change. So who can do budgeting? It's everyone in the organization. So that you don't go and tell your accountant that you are stingy for not giving money. Please involve yourself in the budgeting and forecasting process. So at the end of the day, it's a collective effort to get an effective budgeting system in place. So the accountant, you don't just sit in your corner and then put some figures somewhere. You don't know what the other units have on their target list. So you also consult, negotiate if you have to, and then make sure that everything, everybody, every department fits into the budget that you are preparing for the year. So managers, owners, employees, you all have a hand in the process. Information will be required from all levels. You don't have all the information. So consult. In Deloitte, we say consult, consult, consult. Consult other departments, other units, see what they have to bring on board. If it's a training, a seminar like this one, I'm sure there was some financial impact from this training. So if you didn't consult, and then now somebody comes to say, I'm going for non-profit organization summits, I need this amount of money. They say there's no budget for it. Then what happens? You get tagged as teams. So what should budgeting be done? It's usually before the start of the next financial year. So don't wait till, if your financial year is January to December, don't wait till January before you start preparing your budget. Start earlier so that it gives you a longer time duration to make sure that everything is in place. And the earlier also go around looking for funders and then all of that. So you also have to take into consideration their budgeting cycles. So like PwC, yes. So when you are going to them for funding, you have in mind the time that you should go. So that if you go later and they tell you run out of money or there's no budget, then you are not at the loss. So why do we think we should do budget? Why? Is it necessary? Yes, it's very necessary. Reason is it gives proper planning and implementation. So when you budget, then you know exactly what you are doing at every point in time. You know what expenses to go through at a point in time and what you don't go through at a point in time. You know where your revenue, your funding sources are coming from. You know how much you are anticipating to get and then who to contact to get that fund. You know which expenses allow and disallow. So it gives you room to properly plan. And when it comes to implementation too, you know that A, B, C, D is what the target is. And so that is where you focus. Control expenditure, like I've already mentioned, you know what expenses allow and disallow. Because at the end of the day, you are going to justify that report that you give to your funder at the end of the year. So if your funder says, bring me a report, financial statement of how you have spent my money, then you go and you compare and say that, but this was not what was in the budget you gave. How come it is like this? You are going to justify. So you need to control the expenditure that you put in your budget. It's a way of measuring performance and accountability. Somebody has to be accountable for the budget. So as the accountant, your ultimate aim is to safeguard the organization's money. So that is where you are held accountable. So when you go to your management and then you are trying to defend something and it's not going out well for you, they know that you are held accountable for that because you allowed that thing to go through when it wasn't supposed to. To monitor progress and continually make improvement. Employee involvement. So like I said, it's not a one-person job. So as you encourage involvement from employees, then they also feel appreciated. They also feel that my input is necessary. They also feel part of the whole process of where the organization is going, the future of the organization. And so they are able to bring out ideas that will better the course of the organization. They also have communication, just like the employee involvement. So what are the features of effective budgeting? It should be fair. There's a tendency to rely solely on previous knowledge. Last year, this was how things were. And so this is how our budget was last year. So let's roll it over to this year, and that will be our budget for this year. So it doesn't work like that. So you can rely on some information from last year, but also consider what is happening in the current year. What was happening last year is definitely not what will happen this year. As we stand now, we know that our city is appreciated. Previously, it was not the case. So do you need to go back and revise your forecast for what you do? That's why the forecast is more flexible. So now you can revise your forecast according to how things are currently. You should be even-handed. There are some things that we consider important and others that we consider less important. Less important that if they are not implemented, the organization will still be intact. But there are others that definitely they have to be paid. There are some expenses you can't do without. You have to pay your employees. So they should always be in your budget. But there are some, let's say, entertainment, for instance. If you have entertainment in your budget and you realize that no, things are not going well, so where do I cut? Which expense line do I cut? You definitely will not cut your employee salary. You can cut your entertainment. Because if you cut the employee salary, you will not affect. So you try to manage the things, see what is important, what might be there, what you can do to use, and all of that. Supported by those implementing it. So if the accountant doesn't support the budget because you are sitting in somewhere and management thinks that it's your budget. So the accountant doesn't feel involved in the process. So how do you support the budget? You put it somewhere and you allow every expense, everything to go through. So those who are implementing the budget have to support the budget. And how do you support the budget? By being part of the budgeting process. That's why you have to involve everyone in the process. It should be reasonable. You know that things are hard. So let's not go and make unrealistic targets for ourselves. So if you know that usually you don't get funded up to $1 million, don't put in your budget that I will get funding of up to $1 million. Because then you are going to do your expenses based on that $1 million, and then the $1 million will not come, and you have a deficit. How do you then manage that deficit? That will be another problem on it. It should also be participation. So experience and knowledge from everybody is decided. Next slide. So what are the methods of budget setting? We have the top-down or imposed, bottom-up or participating, and then the negotiated. So let's look at this. So the top-down, like I said earlier, there are some organizations, management will gather somewhere, prepare the budget, and then come and hand it over. It doesn't encourage support, like I was saying in the previous slide. So in that case, you don't know exactly what went into the budget, but you are supposed to implement the budget. So what are the advantages of this system? Are there advantages and what are the disadvantages? So the advantage is minimal expenses. You know some organizations, budgeting is a big thing, so they really invest a lot into it. But if management has decided to take it upon themselves, then it reduces the cost of the whole process. It saves time as two people are involved. So there's no back and forth, bring your own, it's delaying department A, it's delaying the process, department B, there's nothing like that. So it saves time and expenses. But what are the disadvantages? Sometimes when you're sitting at the top, you don't know what is happening at the bottom. You might have some information, but it's not complete. So you need to consult those at the bottom for all the information you need to prepare the budget. So if management is taking it on themselves to just prepare the budget, then how do they get the important information from those at the bottom that will feed into the budget preparation? And so it turns out that the budget is come and it is very narrow. The lack of involvement in certain quantitative plans for the future may reduce commitment. Like I said, if you don't involve the person who is implementing, then there's no commitment from that person towards the process. Okay, so the bottom up or participate. Some of us, when we bring or say some of us are parents, when your child is going to SS, you say, okay, bring your list for school. Then okay, will bring his list. This is what and what I want when I'm going to place So now Kofi does not have an excuse. You brought your budget. So if something is not right, it's not my fault. That is what you brought to me. And so because Kofi is involved in the process, Kofi will now be thinking outside the box. What do I need to put in? What do I not need to put in? How much is that you need to put in? So now Kofi is committed to that budget that he has presented that before implementation. They are more realistic as the information to support them is provided by people close to the scene of the action where the budgets are actually implemented. So let's say some people go out to the field monitoring and evaluation, and they come that this is how much it will cost, CNC, accommodation, and all of that. So now when you are doing your budget, you know how much you put in there for monitoring and evaluation costs. If you don't do that, and you put a figure there, and now they come, that this is how much they need, then there's a problem. If that amount is more, where are you going to get the balance from to give to them for that process? What are the disadvantages? It is expensive and time consuming. Let's assume your organization decides that every budget cycle will go to Aqua Safari. And we will gather to discuss. Some companies actually have strategy sessions that they go away for, let's say, a day or two to discuss about the financial issue. So if you take a few people, that's cost saving for you. But in this case, you are taking a large number of people because of the approach that you have adopted. And so that will cause you more using method of budget. Managers taking a narrow view of their activities, ignoring the impact of their actions or demands on other departments. We can tend to be selfish. I don't know what is happening in Department A. My own is that this is what is happening in my department, and this is the budget I want. This is how much I need to be in the budget room. So sometimes you tend to neglect or you tend to ignore what the others also do, and then you more or less narrow it to yourself. So that's one of those disadvantages. Inflated or deflated estimates of resource requirements as managers seek to protect their own interests. Greater input required at departmental and central level. So now we come to the negotiated budget. So this is in essence the extension of the participating approach. Senior management sets broad goals and constraints, and the process involves discussion, negotiation, and at the end of the day, alignment to what we said the best interest of the organization. So there's increased commitment and the feeling of budget and forecast ownership due to involvement in the negotiation process. So, Department A will come with a training budget of 5,000. The management will say, okay, A is 5,000, B is 6,000. But looking at what we have available in terms of funding, we cannot meet this. So, can you come to a compromise? Somebody has to reduce his or her training budget. And so there's negotiation, like go to the market. How much is the fee? 10,000. So I know the amount is sensitive, but that's when you now start negotiating with the fixed seller. Okay, so I have this, then before you know it, you come to a compromise. So that is how this budget works. Appreciation that concerns and requirements have been considered. So as you are discussing, then if there are any concerns, requirements, you know that at least if it doesn't get into the budget, but you have tried your best. Management has listened to maybe next year if there's more money, that item will get into the budget. Greater understanding plans of individual departments impact the organization as a whole. So now people get to appreciate that every unit in the organization comes together to form the whole. So it's not just about Department A. Now you know that other departments also need this, other departments also need that. And so you get to appreciate what each of you needs. The disadvantage here is the final allocation will always be a compromise. So you walk away with a compromise, not exactly what you went in with, but at least you have gotten something out of it. So what are the types of budgets? We have the operating budget. So this is more or less the core of the organization's processes. So this will cover your administrative costs, rent, utilities, insurance, and the like. Then we have the program budget. So this is for a particular initiative that you have earmarked to embark on. So you need a budget for just that project. So it will be different from your normal operational budget. And maybe you have identified somebody who you want to approach for funding. The person might ask you to bring a budget for this initiative so that based on that, they can know whether to give you the funding or not. Then we have the capital project. So those who engage in capital projects like building hospitals, schools, and the like. So you also need a budget. Because that one is long term, you need to be really careful when you are setting this type of budget so that you don't lose certain aspects of it in the process. So what are some of the control techniques that you need when setting your budget? Setting the objectives clearly. So everybody needs to know exactly what is on the ground, exactly where we are going, exactly what we are seeking to achieve. So when you communicate the objective clearly, then everybody in the process knows what we are working towards. Formulating the necessary plans to ensure that the desired objectives are achieved. So you set the objective. How do you intend to go there? What is the plan of action for this initiative that you have earmarked? That is very important to consider. Translating the plan into budget. Now you know your plan, you translate that plan into figures. So that will become your budget for that initiative or program. Relating the responsibilities of executives to the budget. So you assign responsibilities to some people in terms of the budget. This is where you are responsible for. Maybe there are heads of different teams in the unit, so you appoint the heads to take responsibility of certain aspects of the budget so that they can be accountable for it. Continuous comparison of actual results with that of the budget and ascertain deviations. So you don't just take the budget and press it down and it's business as usual. So you need to be monitoring and tracking your expenses, actual expenses with the budgeted expenses to see whether you are in line or you are going off course. If you realize that you are going off course, then what do? You pause. Augustine is still here, so I'm sure you know some software that have this functionality of tracking budget variance. So in case you have questions around what software to use, that will help make the process easy. You can consult it. Investigating the variances and establishing the costs. So is it that somebody brought an expense that was not in the budget, but you still pass that expense, that is why you are now getting that variance? If that has happened, then you need to prompt management before you end up getting called by management to come and answer. You have already incurred the thing, so there's nothing you can do. The only thing is to just inform management that this has happened. However, if you were tracking your budget, before you has this expense, you have to seek management approval that you have this expense, but it's not in the budget. What do we do? The management will say, okay, looking at it, it is important, so let's pass it. Or we can do without it, so let's leave it. So you have to be very mindful of that. Presentation of information to management relating to the relating the variance to individual responsibilities. So it's not like you are going to report somebody, but if somebody calls the variance, we need giving management for consideration. Corrective action of the management to prevent recurrence of variance. Next slide. So what are the essentials of budget? Like we said earlier, the organizational structure must be clearly defined and responsibility should be assigned to identify those needs within the organization. So when it's time to do the budgeting, you know who to go to for the information for that. Setting of clear objectives and reasonable targets. Objectives should be in consonance with the long-term plan of the organization. So you set the objectives, you set the targets. Remember, the targets have to be reasonable so that you don't overburden yourself trying to attain unrealistic targets. Budgets are prepared for the future period based on expected courses of action. So depending on what you intend to take, what action you intend to take, then you prepare the budget for that. Budgets are updated for events that were not kept into the mind while establishing budgets, and budgets should be flexible enough for midterm decisions. So one key thing is also don't make the budget static. It should be flexible. Maybe every quarter we decide as a policy, every quarter or semi-annually we come together again, we look at the budget and see if we need to make changes based on what is happening currently. Budget should be monitored periodically. Variances from the set actions is analyzed and corrective action taken. So you need to think about that. The entire organization must be committed to budget. So involve everybody so that they are committed to the process. Next slide. So variance analysis. After setting your targets, assigning figures to those targets, defining your course of action and all of that. Now you have to incur the expenses. As the year went by, you incur the expenses. What do you do? Like I said, monitor your budget and identify variances. It can be every month. When you do your month-end reporting, one of the things that you can add to your month-end checklist is to track your budget against your actual expenses to see what is happening with it. Have you gone overboard on any aspect of it? Or are you within budget? So that in case you have to take action, you take it now. If you wait till the end of the year, then you go into your budget and you realize that now the thing is way off. Then you'll be held accountable. Remember, you are the implementer of the budget. So if anything goes wrong, it's not somebody sitting in HR that will be called to come and answer. It is you who have given out the money that will be called to answer. So you have to do your variance analysis periodically. So it helps management to ascertain the amount of variance, the reason for the variance between the actual performance and budget. Is it that something important needed to be part of the budget, but somehow it was missed? That one is reasonable. And like I said, if something like that comes, you need to go back to management for approval. Who is the person responsible for performance? Is the then you capture a lot of things that you see in the budget, and then when they are implementing, it becomes easier. Are there any questions?
Hello? Okay, I just had a question, well, a comment really, because we're all NGO leaders for the most part, which means we have board governance. So we don't run independent small businesses. So didn't really discuss where the board comes into play and their partnership with writing the budget. In the US, most of the board actually have take part in preparing the budget because it's their responsibility to help to raise money to meet the budget. So we didn't discuss that. And then contingency. I always tell people to make sure you have something, you kind of talked about variance, but budget for your contingencies, because that will also help you as you move forward.
Thank you for that. Any other questions?
So as you can see, budgeting is very vital, very important.